Hey man, what was so significant about the wedding analogy in Jesus' parables and teachings?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that the church is represented as the bride of Christ, and one day he, as the groom, will come for his bride one day.
Yeah, exactly. And there's beautiful imagery within the traditions of a Galilean wedding not a lot of people are aware of.
What do you mean?
Well, I think if we understood how Galilean weddings were carried out, we'd get a better glimpse into Jesus' words about his return.
Huh. So, what was the process of a Galilean wedding?
Well, the first piece that I'll mention is what they called the cup of joy. There would be people that would gather around as witnesses while a wedding agreement was read aloud. The bride would have to agree to the contract, and the way she would agree is by accepting the cup and drinking from it. So this is symbolic of our decision to receive Christ or not. We can take from his cup and drink it, or decide not to.
Right.
So if the bride decided to drink the cup, it would set into motion a series of events that both the bride and groom were to do to prepare for the wedding. This was a pretty unique aspect with Galilean brides, as having a choice wasn't the norm for the surrounding cultures.
Okay.
So she would drink of the cup, and the groom would seal the covenant by saying, "You are now consecrated to me by the laws of Moses, and I will not drink from this cup again until I drink it with you in my Father's house." Which is interesting because in Matthew 26, at the Lord's Supper, Jesus gives his disciples the bread and the cup that represent his body and blood and says, "I tell you I will not drink again of this fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom."
Oh, wow.
Right? It's a cool foreshadowing of how Jesus was consecrating his new covenant with us, speaking as a bridegroom.
Yeah, that is cool.
Then the bride and groom would get to work. The groom would be responsible for getting materials needed to build onto his father's house. The bride and her bridesmaids would spend their time getting materials to make her wedding dress.
Uh-huh.
The groom would also prepare things like new furniture, tables, stools, etc. It was also his role to prepare the wedding feast with everything needed for it, like oil, lamps, and rugs that would also be used in their home.
Okay.
Jesus says this to his disciples in John chapter 14, verse 3. He says, "And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and I will take you to myself, that where I am, you may be also." So this is opening the idea of a rapture. I will come again and take you to myself.
Okay.
Jesus also describes to his bride that there will be those on earth that will not taste death. And so it's our job as his bride, the church, to prepare for the hour of his coming. And the great part about these Galilean weddings is that neither the bride nor the groom knew when the wedding was going to take place. They didn't know the day or the hour, just as Jesus said in Mark chapter 13.
Wow.
It was the father of the groom who would be paying attention to the preparations for the wedding and deciding for himself when the best time the wedding was going to be.
Really?
Yeah, and the best part is that it would happen in the middle of the night, so as to be an hour that they did not expect.
Ha!
And that's what Jesus says about his return, that he would come like a thief in the night. This is why we see his parable of the 10 virgins having to be prepared with oil in their lamps.
Right.
So the father would wake up his son and say, "Go get your bride. Now is the time." And the son would excitedly jump up. He would blow into the shofar, which is basically a trumpet, and blasts it to wake up the whole village.
Huh, that's cool.
Now, up to this point, the bride was supposed to be ready at all times. She was to remain pure and sleep in her wedding dress with her bridesmaids at her side at all times for this hour that was coming. And so this blow of the trumpet would wake up the village, and only the ones who were prepared were invited to the wedding. Jesus uses this as a parable to tell us to be ready for his return, and to not be caught without oil in our lamps, because we would be uninvited to the wedding.
Right.
And so the groom would go to the bride's house, where she would be waiting eagerly, and the groom with his friends in procession would put her onto what is called a litter, and carried her. The Galileans refer to this as flying the bride to the father's house.
Whoa.
Cool, huh?
Yeah, really cool.
And the best part about all this is that you and I are his bride. Our only responsibility is to be ready. We wait eagerly for his return, but keeping busy with our preparations. Just as the bride slept in her wedding dress and her bridesmaids sat ready with oil in their lamps, we need to be wearing Christ's righteousness so that we are invited into the wedding feast.
Amen.
So, let's just be ready.